DJ Professor K coming at you from the Jet Set Radio Station. Today for you, we got some funky beats. What's going on, everybody? We're here at the expLOREation Podcast for episode number 3. If you didn't get it, today we're talking about one of my favorite IPs. We're going to be talking about Jet Set Radio Future. So today with me, I got Greg, my usual co-host. What's up, Greg?
What's up?
So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about like the history of Jet Set. So in 1999, Sega announced that they're doing a new game, and it was Jet Grind Radio, right? And so that game did kind of bad, and it amassed a cult following though. So in 2002, they released a successor to it called Jet Set Radio Future, and that was very much in the same vein. That game did very bad as well, but it amassed somewhat of a let's call it a cult following, yeah. Over the years, and it was a relatively short game. I figured, why not? Let's knock it out, right? So let's talk about this opening cinematic, because I think that's the first thing you really experience when you boot up the games, right? And so the main song, Concept of Love, starts booming at you, and you just see these like teens rollerblading through what you later find out is the Shibuya Terminal level. They're just grinding, they're hopping, they're flying. How did you feel when you first saw this?
It started bringing me back mainly to towards the old Tony Hawk days. That kind of freedom, feeling of freedom, somewhat. And I don't know, it's just kind of something new. You don't really, it's just straight up like in your face, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, man, I feel like opening cinematics, and I wouldn't even call this a cinematic. I call it like it's because it's playing in the menu. I think they're very important, especially to a game like this, and Jet Set Radio Future really presents it nicely. It's kind of in your face. So let's get right into it. We're going to start off with gameplay. So this was my umpteenth time playing it. I've done a playthrough every year since I was like 16. So I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 playthroughs up to this point. But this is your first time, right?
Yep.
I kind of brought this topic to you. So I told you to make a list of expectations, what you expected to see, what you expected to experience, what did you want out of this game before going into it. So talk to me. What did you think? What did you have in mind?
So I made a list of expectations before I actually booted up the game.
Cool.
And I have about 10 points here. So I was in the mindset of it would be more free skate, kind of giving the player freedom to skate around. It wasn't that big or in depth into the story. Since this is kind of like a skating game, I always in early 2000 games they're really big on secret items to collect and just to traverse areas. I was assuming that it's Jet Set Radio, so I already assumed that there was you get points for grinding or doing tricks. I kind of thought maybe they would have a shop where you can upgrade your character and utilize those points in some way to unlock characters or something.
I gotcha.
In-depth grinding mechanics, since the whole game to traverse the levels and whatnot, you grind around. Personality with the gangs, because I already kind of knew there would probably be some.
Yeah, I gave you a heads up.
Yeah. Skating around the area and performing objectives, maybe doing some stunts to get some extra points. I kind of thought that would be in the gameplay as well. Obviously a kick-ass soundtrack. Different characters with different stats, maybe different ways of moving around. They have maybe not just I didn't know there would only be rollerblades, maybe a skateboard or a bike or something like that. Bigger areas to explore, not just one giant map, not just kind of small segmented areas. And I kind of thought it would be somewhat linear, but it would still allow for player exploration and movement,
Kind of a free play.
Yeah, kind of in I guess video games wise Uncharted, where you still have a linear path to follow, but you can kind of go off the unbeaten path to find some secrets or do some cool things. So
Absolutely.
Were my first expectations of the game.
This was some pretty solid things you had down, and I think you nailed some, and I think others were a complete miss. So talk to me about your kind of first impressions when you started playing and you started getting the hang of things.
So my first impressions would be, well, when I first started up the game, the soundtrack was really in your face, and the mechanics just moving around in general were kind of clunky. Which it wasn't completely off-putting, but it was kind of okay, what's going on here? Am I gonna like this or not? But I gave it a shot, and moving throughout the whole story and just the levels and whatnot. It started to grow on me. I think the thing that grew on me the most, definitely though, was the soundtrack itself.
Yeah, we'll get into that a bit later.
Yeah.
But coming from a guy who's played this a couple of times, always my first impression is I can't believe how easy this game is to pick up and play, even when it's been a year or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Did you experience the same thing? You just picked it up and you started going?
Yeah. I think after the first level, I started all coming together, and I was able to just move around freely. So,
Yeah, absolutely. The art style and soundtrack are very abrasive in all the right ways, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But that was kind of my thing, man. I was like, damn, like I may do a playthrough of this every year, but I always forget that sometimes you just pick up the controller and go. Especially if you've been playing it for a while, you can start comboing. But yeah, so let's talk a bit about some of the game mechanics.
yep,
So they're kind of weird in a sense. So a couple of these game mechanics revolve around the spray paint cans you pick up throughout the levels, and the first notable one being is that you tag up spots, and that's like a main centerpiece of the game. And then revolving around the spray cans, you also have like a what do they call it? A jet boost
yeah,
or
the
a
jet
jet
boost,
dash.
yeah,
So
the
you
jet
hit the B
dash.
button and you gain some speed. You start going fast, which will enable you to hit higher combos. It'll let you go faster. It'll let you
Higher
jump
jumps.
higher. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. What else we got for game mechanics? We got grinding.
yeah, the grinding aspect of that.
You hop on rails, poles, and it'll just auto grind
Anything,
for
yeah,
you. There's
just
there's no
walk right
balance
on.
system like we saw in some of the earlier skate games, like Tony Hawk and all that good stuff. It's a very simple kind of fundamental thing. You hop
Yeah,
on it, and the tricky portion is when you got to jump off,
yeah,
especially when you got things to pick up, you got spots to tag, things of that nature, right?
yep.
What'd you think of these?
The mechanics overall, I mean, they were really like, I mean, it's like the first time I guess a game like this would be doing something like with these mechanics, but I feel like they could have been more polished. I felt like with these, like especially with the grinding, like an auto grinding, it would just really, kind of put me off because I would be like, oh, I don't want to grind, but it would automatically lock on and just take me away somewhere.
Yeah, a big portion of the grinding mechanic for me at least was setting it up because I feel like sometimes you got to know what you're going for right off the bat, and if you're kind of fidgety and you're indecisive, you're gonna hit stuff you don't want to hit. Especially with a couple of those levels where like you have telephone poles really close to each other, sometimes you're gonna hit the wrong one. Same with rails,
Yep.
and it can be clunky at times. But I do think it's fun, and I do think traversing the
Yeah.
levels are excellent once you get like the flow down and once you know where all the rails are, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of learn as you progress.
It's the best way to traverse the levels because just skating around isn't gonna really get you anywhere.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of these levels. I think personally that Jet Set Radio Future has some of the most interesting level design that I've seen in a video game. We talked about this briefly before we started recording, but tell me some of your thoughts on it, man.
A lot of the level design, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The different like areas and whatnot, they kept it like spice, kind of spicy. So you'd go to an urban metropolitan area and your usual kind of handrails and on your stairs and whatnot,
It
or
feels like modern day Tokyo, right?
exactly.
Nothing too crazy.
But then you start getting into these levels that are more traversed around rooftops, and then you start going into telephone poles and just traversing, like I said, the rooftops, like going off of big jumps and whatnot. I think it kept it interesting, like to the point where I'm actually like hooked on like throughout like my gameplay. Like I don't want to be like it's not like mundane.
Yeah, I gotcha. I think the big thing for me was that realizing that a lot of these levels have honestly a lot of personality to me at least
Yeah,
because you do have that kind of grounded aspect in the first couple of levels in the game or chapters I should say where it feels like city Tokyo with Shibuya Terminal, Chuo Street, where it feel like it wouldn't be too outlandish to maybe see this in real life.
yeah,
But then you start getting towards the crazy later endgame stuff like the Faro Park District
yep,
and the Skyscraper District. You get into the Sky Dinosaurian Square.
yep.
Highway Zero was it felt grounded in reality, but a lot of it was very like made up. Kibagoka Hill, which is phenomenal.
Oh, I love Yukibiko Hill.
I think that a lot of these levels were creative leaps because it's very easy to make things feel like one another, especially when you got a good formula down.
Yeah,
Like Chuo Street, I'd say, and Shibuya Terminal are probably the most memorable out of those initial phases. And it'd be very easy to kind of repeat that formula where you have like an open area circular design and you could kind of grind around the whole map in, like
yeah.
a couple of seconds.
I think you can see how like the developers, they didn't just say, okay, let's bundle like these levels up and just kind of make them look the same. They actually like took the time to give each like level like a personality and all about that, everything, and they just hit the mark with everything.
Absolutely. Each of the level groupings also has their own soundtrack. We'll talk about that when we hit the music section. Excuse me. But so I think for me at least, when things start to get interesting with the maps is right around the time you hit Rokaku Dai Heights, which is kind of this weird suburban industrial park, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And it's I think it's the first time you experience some real sort of verticality.
Yeah.
Whereas before there was high spots and stuff, but like this, you kind of grind your way up into the level, like almost like a staircase, and you hit a point where you're at the very top, and then you can just hop back down. It's a very interesting design. So of course with levels we got to talk about favorites and worst. So what what was your favorite level, and describe it to me and why you liked it so much.
I thoroughly enjoyed 99th Street. It was fairly simple. You know, you had the tower in the middle with like the dragons, and then you had the two kind of split off areas. I like the design mainly, like the color scheme, because it was like it was like
It was
a
vibrant. It was like
vibrant,
that
like a
neon Tokyo.
neon Tokyo design. The colors are phenomenal, and the level design in general was like pretty good. I mean, I'm a pretty simple person, so I like kind of like the grounded stuff, but it gave you the option to grind on those like the telephone wires up top, and just kind of it was a lot of zigzagging, and you could traverse the level easily because of that. Plus, the tower in the middle was always fun to grind on, especially the dragon.
Absolutely. I also enjoyed 99th Street. I love the Y design. It's very simple, but it feels much bigger than it actually is.
Right.
It feels like you're actually in some weird subsection of Tokyo, and I don't know, man. I'm a sucker for those bright colors. My PC set up that way, and it's just so vibrant and so full of life. It feels like a genuine, like, hearted downtown experience with this Tokyo stuff. I love the way you get there. How you start off on the highway, and it's like super high up, and you
Yeah.
jump down, and you're kind of like in the middle of things. I think that level is a lot of fun to traverse, especially once you start hitting those challenges, once you start hitting those crazy aerial grinds. And then, as I kind of remembered, that there was a point where you gotta do a flag chase with the Rapid
Rap
99
99.
girls, right? And I totally forgot that there's those like rooftop overhangs on some of the passageways and stuff. I was like, damn, I totally forgot about this.
Yeah.
And that addition of a rooftop helps you traverse the level faster. It helps you with points, all that sort of things. I think that design is beautiful, and it's kind of at a base level in its core. It's very like simplistic,
Right.
but it's because of all the decorations and all the maybe little secret things and the extra stuff sprinkled onto that base layer of goodness that makes it so nice. Another one of my favorites is actually Kibogoka Hill, and it's for those of you who haven't played Jet Set Radio Future, it is one of those, like, it looks like a slum, really,
Yeah.
like a slum of Japan, and you grind through it on
Telephone.
telephone poles, electrical wires, and billboards all throughout. And there's essentially, I think, one spot in the game that's like on the floor, feet planted on the floor, and the rest of it you gotta like fly through. And I think that level is a whole bunch of fun. First of all, because it's like easy to traverse through. Once you hit that point in the game, you should already have the hang of like the grind mechanics, the jumping mechanics, and timing. But in addition to it being fun and easy to traverse through, it's a quick way around the map.
Yeah.
Once you get that down, you find yourself doing laps in like under a minute. It's really cool and fun. And there's a lot of like weird secret stuff. Did you happen to come across there's a secret room in there with dogs, I believe,
Oh, really?
or cats? I think it's cats. Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
There's a whole bunch of secret stuff in that level, and there's a
Oh
bunch of
man.
cool shit. But yeah, that one's really fun to explore. What was the worst level for you?
So the worst level, in my opinion, would be what was the roller coaster map name?
Sky Dinosaurian Square.
Yeah, Sky Dinosaurian Square. I did not like that at all. Just overall having to like rely on the roller coaster rails to traverse the whole map. I felt like I was kind of glued to that.
I feel you.
I couldn't really like move
You
around
got
the
like a
whole
set
map.
path or something?
Yeah, like I couldn't really move around, doing much. And the challenges in that area were kind of like,
Hard.
they were extremely hard,
Yeah,
especially when you're
it's
trying
an
to grab the
end
graffiti
game map.
souls. Yeah.
I'm kind of split on that map because I love the design of it. I love kind of the look and feel. I love it. It has a lot of what 99th Street has that
Yeah,
what
the
I
colors are
enjoy.
fine with the neon. It's just that
It is
linear
one of
gameplay.
those. I feel like it's one of those where if you don't know your way around and you don't get a good grip on it the first couple of minutes, you're gonna be in for a bad time.
Oh yeah.
Worst level for me, I think the skyscraper district in Faro Park were kind of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Mostly because I mentioned this briefly, but like the main Faro Park area where you have the pyramids, the rails, the pillars, and that big like roller coaster thing in the middle.
Yep.
I think that's fine. That's like okay in nature, but it's the skyscraper district that kind of gets me. And it feels like everything's so kind of spread out, not in any like rhyme or rhythm. It's spread out because they felt like the level should be bigger. And it feels like a cop out. Like traversing the skyscrapers is fine and all, but there's a point in it where I was just jet dashing off the side of the building just so I would fall off and respawn closer to the highway to get me to the next part, you know?
Yeah, I was doing the same thing.
And I feel like as a I don't want to say I'm a game designer, but I feel like that should be something you keep in mind as a game designer,
Right.
where there's a point where you stop having fun traversing through it, and you kind of hit this point where the players are woefully jumping off the side of a cliff to spawn closer to the save point or whatever it may be, right?
Right. And then the skyscrapers in general were just like that. Both those areas were just like, as you mentioned before, barren. Like there was really nothing to do there. It
Yeah,
was
they're,
just a
they're
bunch
like
of
grossly
satellites
spread
and
out
solar panels.
from the middle of it, but yeah, it definitely felt like it was like somebody went in there and said, "Hey, make this bigger. I don't care how, figure it out.
Exactly.
And overall, I really do enjoy the levels in Jet Set Radio Future. They all have this like unique personality and this feel to them. And I don't know, man. I don't think I've experienced a game similar in its nature, and especially so kind of intricate with its level design, I should say.
Yeah.
So speaking strictly about gameplay, what were some of your overall likes and dislikes about this?
Overall, like gameplay likes and dislikes.
Yeah, let's get into that because I know you had some issues with the game.
Right. Yeah.
So aside from the grind mechanic, which we kind of covered earlier, how sometimes it's wonky and sometimes you'll grind the wrong things.
Right. Well, I guess I feel like some of the tasks, like when you, all right, so when you like go into a new area, you would have like a set, amount of tasks to do. So it would always be usually what, like hit graffiti spots, and then the police would show up and you'd have to take them out, or like a local gang would show up and you'd have to, either do the tag team or the flag, whatever, the race or whatever.
Yeah, I get you.
And I feel like, especially with like the graffiti and whatnot, I mean, it was cool because the graffiti were in like different spots, which were like hard to get. But I like after a certain amount of time, it's just like, oh man, like I got to go through this and I got to do all this stuff to like, kind of traverse the level. I mean, it kind of spiced it up towards the end. I like this a lot. That they with the noise jacks, they had that portion.
Noise tanks?
The noise tanks, yeah, the noise tanks. At that portion, like they had the portion where you had to like bump into them to like blow them up, or the death ball part was kind of cool. But other than that, like I had like. Kind of felt like, oh, I was just like doing the same thing over and over again. So that was like one of my issues, at least with gameplay.
Yeah, I agree in your sentiment on the thing, but I feel like the story things you had to knock out weren't that bad. Once you hit like end game, you start plowing through some of these challenges, and it's
Yeah.
usually hit X amount of tricks either on a rail or in the air, and then it's hit X amount of points, and then each map kind of has a unique challenge that's individual to each. I like the unique challenges just because it's unique and it's map specific.
Yeah.
But I feel like a couple of these are a pain in the ass to get. Coming from me, I'm more of an experienced player, so I knocked out some of these as I was going through the story just because I'm always hitting tricks left and right. But it is a bit of a slodge, especially when you hit the end game, or especially when you hit the point where you need 40 graffiti souls to get past clutch.
Yeah.
And like at that point, it's kind of like, well, what do I do? What's like the easy thing to get out of this? And the challenges are there for really, to me at least, end game entertainment and to kind of keep you occupied while you're playing through the story, at least. That's how I view them.
Yeah.
Some of my dislikes was there's points in the game where the camera gets really wonky, like
Oh,
really
yeah.
bad. And I feel like that's kind of my main downside. And granted, this game is 17 years old. It came out in 2002. It's not like unplayable, but there's points where you're going to be going through like a skinny little alleyway or like a passage or whatever, and there's like small graffiti spots on either side, and they're like flip flopping. And when you hit them in rapid succession and you keep moving forward, your character is going to spin around and go the other way, and sometimes it's a pain in the ass to get them to navigate back which way you want. That was kind of my big thing, man. I was like, the camera has always been some sort of whack when you're not grinding purposefully or when you're not doing this. I feel like it's always that weird in between BS
Yeah.
that the camera spins around and you're like, damn it.
Yeah, speaking of grind spot or like graffiti spots, I also kind of like when you had like the graffiti where it's like multiple circles, at least like 5 or 6, and you like say usually like sometimes they would be located where you have to like grind to get there. I felt like when you would go and spray them, like some of them would like miss because you're going so fast with the grind.
Yeah,
That was kind of
absolutely.
like kind of like a bummer because it's like, oh man, now I gotta like
Now you wasted a can and
wasted a can. I gotta go back, on that telephone pole, jump like directly on it, and it's just like, oh boy.
yeah, some of those maps were pretty sparse with their spray can distribution too.
Yeah.
So you had to be careful or resupply pretty often. Um, as far as dislikes, man, I think that covers the brunt of it. And this may be, technological limitations of the time. And it's like I said, it's not game breaking, but it is kind of
Yeah, I
annoying.
still wish they at least had like a directional switch on the grind where you can switch which direction you're going
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. I wish that too, man. But what are you gonna do? The game's out. It's been out, right?
Yeah, you're right.
What did you feel like were the strong points of this game that you enjoyed?
Overall, mainly like the level design.
The level design was fun.
I like the level design a lot. Like I said, like, each level had like a lot of character, and as bad, like, well, not I wouldn't say as bad, as limited as the grind mechanic was, traversing each map with that mechanic, like it made it like fun.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
yeah, you were just able to just go through and be like, oh, like let's see how fast I can go through in this area, or how can I get through in this area, or oh look, there's a secret, how can I get up there? So you would kind of actually take the time and learn out, like kind of plan your route to an extent.
kind of touching back on the whole level design thing, I feel like a lot of these rails were very purposefully placed,
Yeah.
and they made sense in the kind of choreography of the map, if that makes sense. And a lot of them you could hit off of another rail or off of a jump or something, and it was a very fluid kind of thing. I want to say the thing that really entertains me is when you're grinding. If you tap X or Y, your character will do a trick,
Yeah.
and once you get the rhythm down of it, you could just keep on tricking and tricking and tricking and tricking. I really enjoy that because like a lot of these rails get long, and if you don't know that mechanic, it could feel like a chore, really, honest to God.
Mm.
And I enjoy that. I also enjoy the air flip mechanic. It's the same setup for like air tricks. Once your character does a flip, you could tap X or Y, and he'll do another flip and another flip and another flip. And I feel like between the grind and the jump, which is probably 90% of the way you're going to get through most of the level,
Mm.
I feel like between those two, it provides a lot of like minute to minute kind of fun, if that makes sense. Like in the zone, in the time. Like, yeah, you got to hit all the graffiti tags, or yeah, you're trying to get these combos, or whatever it may be. But just getting there, I feel like the traversal is just so grossly fun in nature
Oh yeah.
that grinding isn't the complex thing. Sometimes it's just the intricate little BS you do while you're grinding. Let's see how many tricks I can hit on this rail along the way before I hit my spot. And I find that is just so enjoyable, especially once you get that rhythm down, like
Yeah.
I said.
I actually like when you're traversing through the sewers, how you to get over like kind of like the what's it those they're called half pipes,
Yeah, the
right?
half pipes.
Yeah, you would have to do the hang time, and then that would boost you up, and then you can like jump over. I think
Dude, I
I always
totally
enjoyed
forgot
that.
about the
I
hang time
love
thing.
that stuff,
I
man.
totally forgot about it until I hit that level again. I was like, oh yeah, this is a mechanic.
Yeah.
But I feel like some of those, if you're hitting it fast enough, you're just gonna fly right over the fence that's
Oh yeah,
blocking you from half
or
pipe
to
to
go
half pipe.
into straight into a grind if you mistime that X.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's plenty of interesting things to experience in Jet Set Radio, and let's talk about this art and music style because I feel like that's most prominent in a game like this. So the art style is a very traditional, cell shaded, and that's one thing. That's one thing in its own. And uh, I don't want to say that a cell shaded game makes it awesome by any means, right?
Right.
Because it doesn't. It's just an art style at the end of the day. It's totally subjective. But I feel like the use of all these crazy vibrant colors and all these like beautiful, kind of back to the level design. Each level has personality. Each level has, like, if I say 99th Street, probably pink, purple, and red are going to come to your mind right away, right?
Light
Because
blue.
that's the color palette of the map. And like when I say sewers, it's going to be like light blues, dark blues, and probably some whites mixed in there. It's a very like kind of dark scheme in place, and they used the art team to its, I think, full potential in my opinion,
Oh yeah.
because I don't want to bring this back to level design, but I feel like I have to. Each level has its own color palette, each level has its own feel, and even that being said, looking at this game is just pure joy. It's really eye candy at the end
Yeah.
of the day, and I don't think I could say anything past that. But if you haven't seen gameplay footage or don't even know what this is, look into it because I think this game is grossly fun to watch between the mechanics and the art style. But art style isn't the only thing we're going to chat about. We're going to talk about the music.
Oh yeah. Oh
So how'd you like the music?
man. First off, it was kind of like
It was weird,
it
right?
was extremely weird. Like I was kind of like, okay, I'm enjoying this, but I don't know why I'm enjoying this. But kind of traversing through the levels and whatnot, and just listening to the music overall, I started enjoying it like a lot more. I kind of started like getting like into the
You felt
beat.
it, yeah.
I felt the beat grinding and whatnot, and it was just loud in your face, blasting, and yeah, overall, I love the soundtrack.
How would you describe it to somebody who's never heard of it or played it?
I
How would
feel
you
like
describe the soundtrack?
it would probably be like a mix, like a triple mix between funky, hip hop, and like techno.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate description. And sometimes you get all three genres in one song, you
Yeah.
know? So the whole kind of musical premise as to why all this stuff is in the background is because a man by the name of DJ Professor K has a pirate radio station. He's constantly pumping some tunes through your headphones. And first of all, I love reasons. I love things with a reason and a purpose to be there. And I thought this was a really simple mechanic. Like all these kids are tuned in to this pirate radio station with this crazy DJ playing all these like swanky tunes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I love that. You mentioned this topic when we were doing some notes. So title implications with music. How did you feel? Because you brought this up. So we're focusing on the title Jet Set Radio Future
Yeah.
and how the music relates to that title.
Well, I kind of stemmed off from it's jet set and it's radio future, and you kind of I guess like at the time of 2000s, what was it like mainly like rock, Breaking Benjamin was kind of pumping through the radio and whatnot.
Maybe not in 2002, but we were kind
Yeah.
of stemming off that 90s bump that we were on. So you had a lot like soft rock. You had a lot of pop disco influence, kind
Yeah.
of things of that nature.
Yeah. So when you go into like Radio Future, and then you listen to the soundtrack, and it's something that you've like at least at that time you've never experienced before because techno was kind of still in that like experimental stage.
Absolutely.
You would hear like the funk, the hip hop, and the techno like blending all into one, and that just like kind of creates this sound that it's like, huh, like like I had the first impression of I don't know why I like this, but I love it. So that's why I kind of get that Radio Future because it's kind of seems like this radio station is kind of from the future,
Yeah,
playing this
so
stuff.
fun fact, the game actually is set in 2024, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 2024. So it was 22 years into the future, essentially, at the time of its release. And I totally agree with you. I feel like the song choice was very deliberate. There was no mistake in any of the song choices.
No.
It really does provide this weird kind of like chromy future vibe with some of the techno songs, but then it gets into this like weird, almost like funky disco kind of stuff where you're just plowing through and like this isn't your dad's disco, this isn't like your mom's funk music. This is a weird blend of the two, where with all these kind of experimental artists coming together on one soundtrack that really create a unique experience.
Some new weird shit.
Yeah, some genuinely weird shit. So quick question for you: do you have a favorite track?
Ooh, I believe it's called "Ending." I don't know. I just really like because it has like this like nice drum beat and then the vocals kind of hit it off for me, and I don't know. I feel like that's one of the more like not like I wouldn't say forgetful, but that's the track that stood out to me. Like when I was like listening to it and grinding through it, I kind of felt like
Uplifting.
uplifting, upbeat. I was like, huh, like this is like I started getting into it.
I gotcha. I think some of the standout tracks for me are like the Latch Brothers tracks, Hideki Nagumo, which did a couple of tracks on this game. I think he did Concept of Love, oldie but a goodie, if I'm not mistaken. And then I liked the Scapegoat Wax song, Hello Allison, Aisle 10.
Oh my
I
god.
think it's so grossly cheesy. I remember the first time I heard it, I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, I was like,
But it's like weird. It's catchy in like a weird sense.
Yeah, it would kind of get stuck in your head, and you just like you'd be at a supermarket and
Like,
you just
Hello Allison,
hello
yeah.
Alice, and just would ring in your head. It's like why?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was, I'd say even that song was like a weird blend of like indie hip hop. It
Yeah,
really did feel like it. But that being said, we mentioned earlier that a lot of these levels are clustered into what I call musical biomes.
mm.
So I wanted to mention this because it's super prevalent in, I think the first area where you really notice is when you hit the sewers, right?
Oh yeah,
So everything prior to the sewers, you got all these kind of grounded levels and these very realistic for
metropolitan
yeah,
areas.
metropolitan kind of structured areas. And you have a relatively kind of tame soundtrack. You get the weird funky stuff, you get a little bit of this, you get some upbeat jazz and things of that nature, right? It's pretty tame to this point,
Yep.
at least in the scope of this game, right? And you hit the sewers
Ooh,
and this weird, like grimy
hip hop.
hip hop and like deep dark electro. And I feel like it does just such a phenomenal job of capturing the feel of the sewers. Like that one song, come on, come on, come on. And I don't know, man. It's just something about skating in the sewers that, to me at least, it would sound like an echo chamber, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like these songs do a really good job of like exemplifying that, like the production on this sounds like it's in an echo chamber or this or that, and it's a very distinct sound.
Yeah, like it makes you feel like you're in the sewers. It's dark, it's grimy, and yeah, it just makes you feel like it sets up the atmosphere of the level.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of these sewer songs also had very interesting like instrumental choices. Like, granted, most of these are keyboards, but it's the effects and the sounds that come out of the keyboard, right? And it was just like it was no chimes, nothing super high octave or high pitched. It was a lot of bassy lows. It was a lot of weird, strange mids put through all these crazy synths, and it created just such an awesome atmosphere.
Yeah, I think I mean I don't know. I kind of just like this just kind of popped into my head too. Like it kind of stems from like this like these grimy hip hop beats. I kind of noticed that there were those tracks were kind of more useful with like the vulgar language, and since you're in the sewer,
Yeah, it makes sense too,
it
right?
kind of makes
Because you're in a
sense.
dirty, grimy place. Why not
Yeah.
use dirty, grimy language? Absolutely. So there's the sewer biome, the kind of metropolitan biome, and then to me at least, like the I don't even know what to call it. Let's call it the highway biome because it's all the maps that link off the main highway into the game. So like, I think 99th Street kind of tags along into it a little bit,
A little bit.
but mainly like Skyscraper District, Highway Zero, and a couple of the other songs, or I'm sorry, levels that had this weird, kind of like mellow rock synth thing going on.
Mm,
And it was very interesting, and I felt like that was very good for levels with like a ton of open space like this,
yeah.
where you just hear like the guitar just easing in with all this distortion and all these pedal effects coming in, and you're just flying through, like the skyscraper district and things of that nature. Do you have a favorite biome out of all these?
Um, like out of like what like the levels like which like
Yeah,
or
like all right, if you were to pick a level with your favorite soundtrack on it, what would that be?
probably be the Pharaoh District. I don't
Pharaoh
know.
District has some good tunes,
Yeah,
man. Too bad it's a bad level.
yeah,
But we always had this joke because I have some buddies that have played this game too, and then you'd play a song and the joke would be like, "Oh yeah, this is definitely sewer music," because it was like dirty, grimy, like beats, this and that, like things like. I'd say a lot of the songs off the Money Store by Death Grips would be 110% sewer music, nothing but,
yeah.
kind of things of that nature. But let's talk about how these two things, the art and the music, add to the overall personality and uniqueness of this game. So I mentioned that it's not the art style that makes your game. It should be something that highlights your game, right? Just because a game is beautiful in art doesn't necessarily mean it plays well or that it's fun to play.
Yep.
Same with the soundtrack. A lot of these, like Tony Hawk had a phenomenal soundtrack. Those games had a phenomenal soundtrack, and I'm not saying they're bad, not by any means, but those games implemented a lot of fun on top of that. But speaking specifically about the Jet Set Radio Future personality, talk to me, man. How did the art choice and the music choice influence everything to you, for you at least?
Well, I mean, at least for me, like how the art and musical choice like influenced the whole game. I feel like it kind of made it like it made the game feel more kind of brought me back to like my childhood,
In,
somewhat.
in what way? Because if I said that, you can make the argument that I'm being nostalgic. I'm looking through rose-colored glasses,
True.
and this is your first time playing through it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're not allowed to feel like that, but like, what was it about it?
Like I mean, like it was just like the vibrant colors and it just like the music was kind of chaotic to some sense. There wasn't really like rhyme, like there was some rhyme or reason to the musical soundtracks, but a lot of it's just kind of like in your face out of nowhere. And then just how overall the level looks. Could be also like the older graphics as well, but I don't know. It just brought me back to my childhood and kind of made me feel a little bit more like free. Kind of
No, dude, I totally
yeah,
feel you.
off the chain type thing.
I feel like going into this game, there's a sense of carelessness to it.
Right.
Not in the way the game was made or not in the way it was marketed, but kind of the way it feels. Like I said earlier, I totally forgot how easy it is to pick up this game and just hop in. And I feel like because of the nature of the artwork, because of the nature of the soundtrack, it's very inviting and very enticing. Because nobody like the people that know this soundtrack probably know it because they've played Jet Set or because they know somebody who's played Jet Set or they stumbled upon it randomly, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like nobody like goes into this like weird sub genre playlist of this kind of things and they're like, yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. I feel like it kind of grows on you slowly, and once you get past like the initial weirdness, you kind of embrace it.
Yeah.
You're like,
It
wow, this is
adds it
really
adds to the
grimy.
uniqueness of the game.
Absolutely, and I think this game has just such a wonderful, colorful personality. Everything from the janky game mechanics to some of the weird, like the level design that doesn't make sense on a construction or industrial point of view,
Yeah.
to the soundtrack that really doesn't have any kind of semblance on a surface level, but it's these transitions that DJ Professor K makes. It's this like loose sense of story that you have, and it's this feeling of freedom really that you get from this game. And like I said, it's just so easy to hop into, and this is like float like a butterfly 110% of the way. You
Oh
just
yeah.
fly, and once you get the hang of it and you got that soundtrack pumping, it's nothing but smooth sailing.
Yep.
So I mentioned briefly the loose resemblance of a story. Let's talk about this. So run me through the overview of this story.
So essentially, the whole story is about you are in a gang called the GGs,
Mm-hmm.
and you go around and just kind of fight off like rival gangs, like in different territories, tagging up their places and just taking them out as a whole. And you're dealing with that as well as the Metropolitan Police Force and their crazy captain.
Captain
So
Hayashi. Yeah,
yeah,
good stuff.
Hayashi. So you were dealing with both of those, and then things kind of take a weird twist
Yeah, they took a
towards
weird
the end.
twist at the end. I think the story is maybe not the strongest suit of this game
No, no.
because there's not much character development, if any. I think the only development you get really is from DJ Professor K and
Yeah.
Hayashi and the characters you don't play as, really. What'd you think of it, man?
Overall, the story.
Yeah, talk to me.
Um, I feel like, as you mentioned, there really wasn't a story. I mean, to me, it was kind of more like background stuff for me. I felt like the main levels and all that stuff, were like my main point of view with the game. The story really wasn't like I don't want to say like linear, but I don't know. There wasn't really any rhyme or reason to it. I mean, to an extent, because you still had your set objectives like, oh, like here's this gang and then here's the police force and whatnot, and it's just like that weird with the golden rhinos and whatnot coming out of nowhere. But I don't like it was just kind of like, okay, like here's a story. That's pretty much it. It wasn't really like anything that stood out to me.
Do you feel like this game needed a story?
Honestly, no.
No,
I don't think
I'm
no.
actually in the opposite ballpark here. So what's your rationale for no story?
Well, like I said, to me, the story kind of felt like kind of like a background thing. If
It
this,
wasn't the centerpiece.
no, it wasn't the centerpiece at all. The level design of the map and the music and all that was essentially it. If I guess like if the game literally just said, okay, here's like some objectives, it didn't even need a story. Like the whole like, okay, you and then here's your gang, here's a rival gang, go ahead and like duke each other out on these levels. I feel like that would have been perfectly fine, especially with like how the mechanics were. I don't even think like we need a story at all. DJ, Professor K could still be on like the radio station blasting tunes, but there really didn't need to be like this whole like, oh, the mayor is this giant bad dude and whatnot, and yeah, that in my opinion that wasn't needed.
I gotcha. Here's my mentality of it, right? I feel like if you give the player maybe too much freedom, that they're not gonna know what to do with all of it.
Right.
Games like Skyrim do it kind of well, but also kind of bad because Skyrim is known for its kind of open world design and this and that and all its little trinkets and secrets throughout the map, right? But that's also a much larger game. I think it's like 50 times the size of Jet Set Radio Future, right? And it
Right.
also came out 9 years later, blah blah blah. I think that Jet Set needed somewhat of a baseline story, and here's my kind of thought process, right? I feel like if you just dumped a player into this world, and let's just roll with what you said that, hey, you got rival gangs out there, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
I feel like that there'd be a point in time where the player's like, why am I doing all this? What is my motivation here?
Right.
And granted, the story, like I said, is not a strong suit of this game, but it does provide motivation for the player. It gives them reason to progress through the story, and it unlocks new and new levels as you kind of progress through the main storyline, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's the part I was looking forward to because I knew all the layout. I knew the layout of the whole map. I knew where the levels were, this and that. There was a point where I was trying to go to the skyscraper district in Sky Dinosaurian, and it like kept yeeting me back around, because I didn't hit that part in the story, and I was like, damn it,
Oh yeah.
I may have to trudge through this, but it'll be worth it.
Mm.
Is how I saw it.
Right. I mean, I feel like you could have like I want to say stemming like backtracking or anything, but I feel like you could, like I said, ditch the story and like you said, okay, there's no motivation. They could have had it where you still have levels, but you would go into a level and there could be like small little cutscenes or maybe interactions with gangs, and then you would do your things like okay, they could have still kept
So you
like the
wanted
tag.
it more of an arcade style.
Right, and then essentially you would complete the like to kick out these gangs, do your graffiti, collect do the challenges, collect the graffiti souls, and then okay you unlock the next section, and then you would kind of the player would kind of be striving towards let me unlock each and every level design and then like level in general, and then once it would kind of like be like okay I want to see the next area. How is this different? How is this different? Like that, they could have done something like that, and it would have been, in my opinion, like fine.
Well, the original Jet Grind Radio did something like that, and the levels were you had a set amount of challenges and you had a set time limit to do it,
Okay.
and so you needed to plow through all the challenges to get to the next one. Kind of like how Tony Hawk's or Pro Skater 2.
Yeah.
You remember that setup? It was very much in the same vein, and I feel like that's the big thing I dislike about both those titles. Actually,
Oh really?
is this kind of no free skate, Because with Jet Set Radio Future, you could really go at your own pace with a lot of these objectives, levels, this and that. Sometimes you could just skate to enjoy the skate, man.
Yeah.
But I feel like with especially Pro Skater 2 and Jet Grind Radio, it was like, shit, I only got 2 minutes. I got to knock out all these challenges. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck on this level forever.
Okay.
And I enjoyed the aspect of the free skate and the kind of integration of the story where it may not have been full frontal nudity in your face, but it was still kind of dangling over you like a carrot, like, hey, here's something to work towards and here's something to progress to. And I do appreciate the attempt.
Right.
So we did kind of extrapolate a big theme out of this story. And so what you omitted from your overview is that these police are trying to kind of regulate these kids. They're
Right.
trying to suppress them and they're trying to shut down the pirate radio station and they're trying to do all these things that essentially amount to the revocation or the censorship
Yeah.
of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So chat to me, man. What did you write here? What's your little dissertation about?
So Japan overall like has been this beacon of sort of perfection, especially like like at least in the early 2000s. In that point in time, there were like big strides in technology, overall economic development, which led to big corporations and office jobs like being the norm with strict hours and being that whole like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this. You're kind of set in molds, and this kind of put pressure on, like, I feel the younger generation that were trying to fit like this mold that society put on them, that they need to follow these social norms, that they needed like a high profession to try and achieve something in life and to be successful. I feel like Jet Set Radio goes like wholeheartedly against this ideology and shows us that like going into an office job and following social norms doesn't have to be like the path that you need to take. You can be completely creative and go against this stigma of profession and still prosper like within life. And that you can do all that you want to do, and you can be that all you like all that you want to be without having to worry about like what others like completely think of you. I like this the outro like with Jet Set Radio Future. I like this quote that Professor K actually said. He said, "These scraps of paper called money, oppressive laws set forth by corrupt men, none of these can ever never extinguish the yearning for freedom, felt in the hearts of all of mankind. The more that people are pushed, the stronger that yearning for freedom becomes." And then it goes and talks about like the mayor. His existence might be nothing more than a symbol of the guilt that people feel for all their greed and desire. Those that seek the truth will fight tooth and nail to find it. This quote like goes on to saying that breaking free from this strict mold is what people want to do, but society and this cloud of perfection that covers Japanese society tends to hold them back until they like no longer can take it. And those that stick with this like stigma never really become anything in life other than just like a body in the world, like
An
another body.
automaton.
What?
An automaton.
An
I said.
automaton, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's kind of full of like greed and corruption. And we can also take from this how like sometimes it's hard and scary to break free from this mold, especially since kind of like Japan tends to like well, I don't want to like say like this whole nation, but at least from society, like they kind of tend to look down on these people and kind of just shun them from there. So I feel like once that people are like exposed, like like free from this mold and are exposed, they tend to be scared off. And I like this because this could be paralleled into the gameplay mechanic, because when you take out the law enforcements, you knock them down and you spray them down like with graffiti
With
to
your freedom.
with your freedom, kind of like with the graffiti to defeat them. And we can stem this off into Harajuku culture, which is normally it's basically like youth running around in bright colors, like bright colored clothes, and they're just kind of like this eyesore in society. And this would completely be an example of what we're talking about, and that's something that like Jetset can relate to. This like culture kind of stemmed from, what was it, World War II, back when the Allies like occupied Japan, and the Japanese youth would kind of go and look at the Western stores and see like these bright colored clothes like jeans and whatnot, and they would go back to like their the other side where in the Japanese society and where they live, and they would just kind of show them off and be like, hey, like this is who I want to be, take it or leave it. And like they would go around with these garments, and yeah, they'd just be completely looked down about Japanese society. We can see this in the game too with like Rapid
Yeah, I
99.
was just about to mention that that's
Yeah,
like a very clear example of Harajuku culture. They
yeah,
have like the bright colored fishnets, tank tops. They're working this like this
yeah,
neon,
goth,
this Miami hotline kind of vibe where it's the
right.
bright blues and pinks and purples, and it's really cool. I think also the Heartbreakers had something like that, or the Love
Right.
Shockers. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harajuku culture is very present in this game,
Mm.
and a couple things I want to touch upon. That DJ Professor K quote, that is so strange coming from a game of this nature, where it's just previously I mentioned that it's a very carefree kind of game,
Yep.
but it has just such a strong message in its theme and meaning. Where yeah, you could work that 9 to 5 grind and make all the money you want, but if it's not bringing you passion and love and it's not something you enjoy doing, then why do it at all, right?
Right.
And I don't know, man. I feel like when I finish the game this time around, and probably every time around, that thing just hits so hard because
Yeah.
I feel like it's totally out of left field,
Yep.
and it's this big kind of oppression of the youth. And anytime you have any sort of like oppression, censorship, whatever it may be, there's gonna be like a rebel cause. There's gonna be pushback, and there always has, and there always will be this pushback.
Yep.
And granted, it's exemplified this way through a cartoony means, through a weird kind of storyline and all this weird stuff. But I feel like the cell shading works beautifully with this theme. I feel like this weird kind of nonconformist soundtrack works with this theme. As opposed to Tony Hawk, which took a lot of like hit singles, a lot of popularish songs, and took a lot of underground songs and kind of brought them to the mainstream, to the light of the public, you know.
Yep.
But this, you can't even call them like underground. They're like even below that. They're like bedrock kind of
Yeah.
tunes, you know, and that ties in really nicely, man. But
Yeah.
I love this whole freedom of expression thing,
Yeah. And
and I
then when you actually look into it, like the things that stick out like are like the skate gangs, like pretty much because they're all in these like brightly colored clothes. They look weird, kind of like like the Poison Jam, like they're fucking sharks, dude, like
yeah,
on
they're
skates.
weird gator shark
Yeah, and
things.
then you look in the background and what you see the cops and the civilians, and they're all wearing everyday clothes, and you just tend to kind of brush past them, and they don't really mean it. Like I wouldn't say they don't mean anything, but they just kind of blended the background, which you can take away from society, where it's like if you want to kind of get noticed and you want to stand out, you know,
Come in with your own style,
be
come in with your
creative.
uniqueness. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I thought your little expose there was really nice actually because, like I said, man, this is the big thing about this game, and I think that's why maybe I keep coming back to it every year. It's just as life moves on, and as we kind of grow older and we get big boy jobs, and eventually we're gonna get married, have kids. I feel like it's important to have that kind of freedom of expression, whether it be a hobby, whether it be something you do, something you say, or everybody's gonna have that little piece of humanity in them
Yep.
because you can't become one of the automatons. You can't become just this kind of mindless walking zombie throughout the universe. And that's kind of the pure giddy joy that I get out of this game, and it's really wonderful, man.
Yeah.
That was an excellent piece. So we covered a lot of this game. I want to talk a little bit about its legacy. Um, Jet Set Radio as a franchise, I think, never really hit the mainstream, but I feel like everybody I've talked to that's played this game really enjoyed it. What I saw the Google statistic where like 99% of users that played this game enjoyed it. That's pretty high, man.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to the kind of underground culture, and it speaks to a lot of game designers and developers nowadays. Because when you play this, it had this profound impact in one way or another, right? So there's this kind of big thing of the player versus the corporation, the underdog fight that we've seen through movie, film, books, whatever it may be throughout the years, right? And this game really kind of brings the heat with that in the most upfront, brutal way. It
Yeah.
doesn't hide it whatsoever. It's literally you, the GGs, versus the police, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we see that, granted, it's not a new theme, but we see that kind of in games nowadays with Infamous, with
Sunset Overdrive,
Sunset Overdrive. Yeah,
even like some of the shooters and whatnot here and there.
yeah. Granted, we're picking at threads here. We're
Yeah.
making very loose connections, but there is somewhat of a spiritual successor, quote unquote, to Jet Set Radio Future, and it's called Hover. It's a parkour game. It uses the same cell shaded style of artwork, and it has a very similar feel. I have not gotten around to it yet. I don't think it'll ever fill that void,
Right.
because Jet Set is just such a unique personality.
Yeah.
On top of that, there was a very loose spiritual successor, and very, very loose. But it's essentially this fighting game called Lethally Blaze. It's a pretty simple setup. You 2 or 4 characters on the screen. There's a ball, and you can only do damage if you smack the ball into your opponent. And so the interesting thing was that one of the producers, the musical producers from the Jet Set Radio game, Hideki Naganuma, came back and did a song for this game. And I thought that was really cool because this guy's still pumping out tracks. This guy wants a remake. This guy wants the soundtrack pressed on vinyl, which I'd love.
Oh man,
You know,
that'd be tight.
but you have these guys that were at the forefront of this game and kind of grabbed it by the helm, and you still have a lot of these guys working out there in the industry and pushing their ideas and their thoughts and their inspirations out into the modern world.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely beautiful. So I felt like the big last thing we should leave off on is, was this game fun and what maybe made it that way?
Mm.
So I think you know my opinion on it. I think the audience knows my opinion at this point. What did you think? You think this game was fun?
Um, in the well, I wouldn't even say bare bones. I think in the final sense, yeah, it was wholeheartedly fun. I mean, it was something new. I mean, yeah, I kind of came in late to the party, so I've kind
And
of
completely blind.
yeah, completely blind. So I've had my fair share of like modern day video games, and just playing something like this just completely opens up like a new perspective. Like I wouldn't even say perspective, but it brings something to the table when it comes when it comes to playing this game. It's not like it stands out. Like the soundtrack, the level design, everything. It just made this like the experience like overall enjoyable, and I wholeheartedly had fun like playing this game. It was a blast.
It's fun in a sense where you're kind of playing it, and there's a point where you don't realize you're having fun.
Yeah.
You know, where kind of everything is so enticing and it engrosses you in the world of the Jet Set. And I don't think I realized how much fun I had until I put it down. And I was like, damn, you know, I'm probably going to wait till next year to play it again. But there's going to be times where I just pick it up and just grind. You know, I think it's a good mindless game to play once you kind of work through your Steam library and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think here's the important question: are you still bumping the soundtrack?
Oh yeah, are you kidding me? I this morning I like
Tunes, man,
when I
tunes.
woke up, bam, like started like playing through the whole damn soundtrack.
Does it wake you up in the morning? Does it get you moving?
Oh yeah, it completely gets me moving, gets me pumped.
I actually have a couple of these songs on like my longboarding little playlist. I think it's grossly fun, and overall, man, I'm glad you enjoyed the game. I'm glad you didn't brush this off when we were picking topics,
Oh
and
yeah, no.
I'm glad you're part of the club now. You know, because it is kind of exclusive in a sense or matter. But to wrap things up, that was our review of Jet Set Radio Future.
Yep.
We covered everything from art, music to gameplay and level design.
Even like weird topics.
Yeah, and some weird abstract things that we had to work hard for.
Yeah.
Um, Overall, if you haven't played this game, I hope this little episode convinced you to at least check it out or at least watch a gameplay footage of it. If you need a reason, it's now or never, right?
If you need a reason, I'm right here.
Yeah, if you need a reason, he's right there.
Yeah.
And he's the testament to it. Well, I think that wraps things up, and this has been episode number 3 of the expLOREation podcast. If you guys have any topics or things you want us to cover, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. We're at expLOREation Podcast.
It's PC.
expLOREation Podcast PC. You could also email us at explorationpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you misspell the word exploration. Emphasis on the lore here, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, we got next week's topic lined up. It'll be a grossly fun one. So we hope
Oh,
to see you
man.
back here for number
Hee.
4. Yeah, he is the way
Yeah.
to put it. Thanks, everybody.
And remember, keep the lore in expLOREation.